Hello and welcome to this quick guide to safeguarding responsibilities for village halls, the big picture. I'm Jackie Wilkinson and I'm the Training, Safeguarding and Quality Standards Development Officer for Community Action Suffolk, and I'll be taking you through this presentation. In this session we're going to look at the big picture. We're not going to look at lots of detail. We're not going to cover what the signs and symptoms of safeguarding are. That's information that you would cover on an Introduction to Safeguarding course. If you're in Suffolk, Community Action Suffolk offer those courses at an introductory level, and you can find them on our website www.communityactionsuffolk.org.uk and look for our training offer, and that's where you will find a range of upcoming dates and on-demand sessions that you can work through at your own time. If you are not from Suffolk, you're still welcome to view those and take part in the sessions. But if you want to look for something tailored to your own county, I would suggest maybe either asking your local village hall advisor for signposting to appropriate courses, or by visiting your local safeguarding board or safeguarding partnership, however they're constituted in your county, for guidance as to where you can receive safeguarding training. In this session, what we will be looking at is why safeguarding is such an important role for village halls, some of the key safeguarding responsibilities you hold, and where you can get support to support you for those responsibilities. With approximately 10,000 village halls across the United Kingdom, it's really obvious, I suppose, that out of all of those village halls, you're going to be a home for very many groups of people and communities. Lots of people will access your hall. You will have some older people that are coming in for maybe fitness sessions, for medical treatments, for lunch clubs. You'll have mums and toddlers clubs coming in. You're going to have the whole range of community and society coming through your doors. And it is quite possible that within those groups that come to your village hall, they see you as a safe space. They're a place where they can get support for their lives. And it is also possible that it would be beneficial to them if you understood some of the basics of safeguarding, which means actually if they do disclose something to you or you see something that you're concerned about, you're actually able to give them that support. But this session is going to look at, say, some of the key safeguarding responsibilities and the legislation, but that's not the reason why we do it, or it's certainly not the reason why I'm as passionate as I am about it. There's a quote I'm about to show you which sums up why, for me, safeguarding is important and why we do it. This, for me, is the big reason as to why we do safeguarding and why it's important we each individually understand our role in it. This is what victims of abuse have said, is if we don't tell you anything and you miss the signs, it means you haven't seen us. If we tell you and you don't do anything about it, then it means you haven't heard us. And if bad stuff is happening to us, it'll just keep carrying on. And for each and every one of us, by knowing just a few small things, we may be able to help stop that abuse happening and let people live stronger, safer lives. The 3 key points for you to remember in safeguarding, and again, when you attend your Introduction to Safeguarding training, it will cover this in much more detail. But for you, there are 3 key points to remember to help make people's lives safer. See it, recognise it, and report it. Very simply, it is that. If you see a situation, recognise that it might be a place of safeguarding concern, and then know how to report it. That is the expectation for you to be able to do that. But very quickly, we'll have a quick look at definitions. Definition of a child, if we're going to talk about safeguarding children or safeguarding adults, it's really important that we understand what we mean by that. So a definition of a child, you probably know this, but if you don't, doesn't matter. It's any person below the age of 18. Doesn't matter what they look like, it doesn't matter their background, it doesn't matter where they were born, it doesn't matter if they are 6 foot tall or they're working in a professional job and are very articulate. It doesn't matter if that child is under the age of 18, they are a child and they are subject to safeguarding responsibilities, and you have a right and a responsibility to report safeguarding concerns relating to any child. The picture on the lower right of this screen is really key to remember as well. Any person below the age of 18 is the definition. That actually includes unborn children. If you have a concern about an unborn child, that's also a safeguarding children's referral. Your safeguarding training will cover all of that in detail and how to make that report if you need to. But the next slide we're going to move on to is a definition of an adult at risk of harm. So clearly an adult is anyone over the age of 18 or over, but not every adult will qualify as a safeguarding adult that needs support. It's an adult at risk of harm. To count as to make a safeguarding referral for an adult, they have to meet a three-staged test effectively. Number one, they have care or support needs, whether or not those are being met. And in addition to that, they need to be experiencing or is at risk of abuse or neglect. And on top of those two, as a result of their care and support needs, they're unable to protect themselves from either the risk or the experience of abuse or neglect. If somebody meets each of those three stages above, then they are, by the definition of the Care Act, an adult at risk of harm. You may be familiar with the term vulnerable adult in terms of safeguarding, but that term is no longer used. Vulnerable adult was replaced by the Care Act in 2014 with the term adult at risk of harm. And one thing we want to be really clear about is that people with care and support needs aren't inherently vulnerable, which is why the word vulnerable was taken away. But they may come to be at risk of abuse or neglect at any point due to a range of factors, maybe physical or mental health, having a disability, getting older, not having support networks, inappropriate accommodation, their financial circumstances, or being financially isolated could lead them to be an adult at risk of harm. A key point to remember in this part of the session around an adult at risk of harm is that anyone can be vulnerable at any time. People can stop being vulnerable too. And a key point to remember at this stage around an adult at risk of harm is it doesn't just apply to the people that come through your doors to use your services as a village hall. It applies to those staff and volunteers that you work alongside. Any adult that you work with could at some point, now or in the future, become an adult at risk of harm. And part of your responsibility legally and morally to each other and to your organisation, your community, is to be able to support them if they do become an adult at risk of harm and to know how to get them some support if they need it. Another key reason for changing the word from vulnerable adults to adult at risk of harm is the way we think about people makes a big difference. If we think of someone as vulnerable, we may well think that we need to do some safeguarding there. It might be a safeguarding situation we need to deal with. However, if we don't think of them as vulnerable, if they don't fit the picture we have in our mind of who is vulnerable, then we may not actually see it as a safeguarding issue and we may not report the situations as correctly as we should. Another point to remember is that not everyone who has vulnerabilities within their life, whether that is isolation, physical health or mental health issues, will be an adult at risk of harm. Many of them will have very strong support networks around them, strong coping mechanisms and be able to keep themselves safe from harm. So do remember that if you are looking at an adult and wondering if they are an adult at risk of harm, they need to meet all three stages of the points on this page. So they have care and support needs and are experiencing or at risk of abuse or neglect, and as a result of those care and support needs are unable to support themselves and protect themselves from abuse or neglect. To do full justice to this, I would strongly recommend attending an Introduction to Safeguarding course, and that will take you through this in much more detail. But now I'm going to look at the main safeguarding legislation that applies to children. So if you have children coming into your village hall or your community building, this is going to apply to you. And I have underlined, it's not a definitive list. There are a lot more. And the responsibility, of course, lies with your trustees to understand what legislation applies to your own organisation. So a few that you might hear of: the Children's Act, the Children and Families Act, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. A key one on here is Working Together 2018. That sets out the responsibilities for everybody, including the voluntary community and social enterprise sector, for what they need to be able to do in terms of keeping safeguarding responsibilities at the forefront of their mind and keeping people safe as they interact with your organisation. And again, it's not an exhaustive list. We're now going to move on. Main safeguarding legislation applying to adults. Again, this isn't an exhaustive list, and your trustees will have the responsibility of ensuring they understand what all of the risks are that apply to your organisation. Some of the key ones, the Care Act 2014, we already mentioned that, if you remember a few slides back, when we mentioned about who is an adult at risk. The Care Act is the overriding key legislation that tells everyone's responsibilities for safeguarding adults. All of the others will also come into play at some point to a greater or lesser extent, depending on what you are doing. But I'm now going to have this left on the screen for a moment for you to look at it, and then I'm going to move on. Okay, I'm going to move on now to some other possible implications. And I do stress possible. It doesn't mean that this is going to apply to every single organisation. But if you don't have safeguarding in place, these things could also come back to you. So we're going to have a look at these. I don't know if a few have even popped into your mind already about what some of the possible implications are if you don't do safeguarding in your organisation correctly. These are some of the areas that you may find that you have responsibilities. The Charity Commission has clear guidance on what the safeguarding requirements are for each individual organisation, and that includes community buildings and the voluntary sector. You could find that you face a claim for civil damages for assault or negligence, for instance, based on a breach of a duty of care that you was owed to children who are under your supervision, or through your organisation's vicarious liability for the acts of the staff and volunteers while those children are in your care. You could face criminal prosecution through statutory offences relating to the failure to carry out DBS checks on staff or failure to notify the DBS of known incidents involving a member of staff. There's also the possibility of criminal prosecution, obviously, if someone covers up the fact abuse has happened or they fail to report an arrestable offence. There could be health and safety breaches as well by failing to maintain a safe system of working. Directors and officers could personally be liable for certain offences alongside the organisation if the offence has been committed with their consent or connivance. Obviously, insurance policies may not actually assist you or support you, since most policies will typically exclude liability for deliberate acts of abuse committed by staff or volunteers. And clearly those, should you be involved in a situation around safeguarding, involvement in any such criminal or civil proceedings could be very costly, attract adverse media coverage that could affect your organisation's ongoing sustainability even, and it could have an devastating impact on your organisation. The duty of care is about individual well-being, welfare and compliance. Educare actually goes on to say this around the responsibilities of all organisations. All workplaces, including a voluntary organisation, have a moral and a legal obligation to ensure that everyone associated with the establishment, whether employee, volunteer, student, tradesperson or the general public, is fully protected from any physical and/or emotional harm, either on the premises or when engaged in activities relating to the establishment. Insurance companies and funders will often want to see a copy of your safeguarding policy as well as a condition of their funding or giving you insurance. And just sort of circling back slightly around the Charity Commission requirements for an organisation, the Charity Commission have said very clearly, and I quote, "Trustees should ensure that their charity provides a safe environment and protects staff, volunteers and anyone who comes into contact with it from abuse or maltreatment of any kind. Trustees should take steps to ensure that no one who comes into contact with the charity suffers distress or harm, as well as safeguarding children and adults at risks, and that's come from the Charity Commission. And that builds on the case of it's not just looking after the people that come through and use your services or use your buildings that you have safeguarding responsibility to, but also to the staff and volunteers that you work with. Michelle Russell is the Director of Investigations, Monitoring and Enforcement at the Charity Commission. And what she has said is, we know that it is vital that trustees set a culture within their charity that prioritises safeguarding, so that the risk of safeguarding incidents is minimised and so that it is safe for those affected to come forward and report incidents and concerns with the assurance that they will be handled sensitively and properly. Michelle goes on to say, our wider compliance casework shows that problems in charities often result from basic failures by trustees to understand and fulfil their legal duties. In the area of safeguarding, this can include failing to recognise that your beneficiaries might be at risk or vulnerable in certain situations, or not taking proper steps to protect others who come into contact with your charity, such as members of staff or volunteers. And if your charity encounters a serious incident or problem, you must report it to the Charity Commission as soon as you are aware of it. If you or other trustees fail to report a serious incident, the Commission could consider it as mismanagement and take regulatory action. The legal company Elderflower Legal are also quoted as saying the following: whether you are a trustee, director, officer, manager, paid professional or volunteer, if your club, association, charity or business works with or provides services to children and young people or adults at risk of harm, you will have a statutory responsibility to safeguard them and their welfare. You must understand what your organisation and personal liabilities are. As I said at the beginning, this is not an exhaustive list and it is not meant to worry you. It is meant to just show how safeguarding falls under many different headings in your organisation and touches many different parts of your organisation. But for each of you individually, regardless of your role, remember those simple 3 points at the beginning: see it, recognise it and report it. And your safeguarding training that you attend will actually help you to do that and help you to fulfil this responsibility. Having an effective safeguarding policy for your organisation is one of the most useful things you can do. Not only do you need it because the Charity Commission say you're going to need it, and your insurers will probably be asking you for a copy of your safeguarding policy as well to get your insurance. It is one of the best things you can have. Put it on your website. Let people know what your policy is. It lets people feel safer when they come to use you. It's also a very simple public commitment to the people who use your organisation so they know what you as a village hall or community building are doing to keep them safe as they come into your organisation. It helps your staff and volunteers to know that should they ever have an issue in their own lives, they know what support there will be available within the organisation. Point 2 on this plan, we see it so often. Have the robust plan written at a time where you have time to create it properly. Don't make it up at a time when it's all going horribly wrong and you're faced with a situation. You may never be faced with a situation of safeguarding, so it's well worth knowing that. But should you ever face that situation, you don't want to be saying at that moment, what do I do? What's our position? Knowing that you have a robust safeguarding policy and procedures that are fit for purpose will take a lot of the stress out of that situation. So please get yourselves an effective safeguarding policy. I will come back to this very briefly at the end of this session to tell you where you can get some more support for that. Seeing the bigger picture. This is our next phase. This is why we take safeguarding so seriously. It helps to keep ourselves, others, and others in our organisation safer. By asking the right questions, it allows us to see the bigger picture of, do we have the right safeguarding policies in place? Do we have the procedures in place? Do we recognise that what we're seeing is actually potentially a safeguarding issue? And then we are able to actually respond appropriately and bring support as is needed. So some handy tips. Ensure your safeguarding policy and procedures are up to date and comply with local and national requirements. Ensure that all your staff and volunteers know their safeguarding roles and responsibilities. Attend relevant training and publish your safeguarding policy and contact details for your safeguarding lead on your website. I'll let you read that for a second and then I'll move on for you. This is a range of the safeguarding support that Community Action Suffolk provides. Anyone is welcome to access it, and your local counties and your village hall advisors will also have information for you. But we have a range of safeguarding training that's available. I've mentioned that once or twice maybe by this point. We have on-demand sessions, work through them at your own pace. We also have the introduction to safeguarding training. That's 2.5 hours of your day is all we ask for you to understand how to recognise the signs and symptoms of abuse and know how to report it appropriately and how to respond. We also have safeguarding policy and procedure one-to-one sessions available. In that time, we work for an hour with you on actually what your safeguarding policy could do with looking like, how it could be improved, how it could be strengthened, where it already is really strong, and actually give you some hints and tips on how you can embed it in your organisation. We also have a Keeping Safe and Sound conference. That's online, that's fully online, it's on demand. We have 8 fabulous workshops in there that you are more than welcome to go and visit and work through at your own time. So it's completely free, and you can also find that by going to www.communityactionsuffolk.org.uk/organisation support, training and development, or just go to the Community Action Suffolk website and put in Keeping Safe and Sound in the search bar and you will find it. We also have a range of example policies and procedures on our website. So go to communityactionsuffolk.org.uk/safeguarding, or just put communityactionsuffolk.org.uk, and on the drop down menu you will see a session that says organisation support, and below that safeguarding, and in there you will find a whole range of safeguarding policy templates and guides that you may find useful. And the final quote I'll leave you is, without a sense of caring, there can be no sense of community. And clearly safeguarding and having effective safeguarding policies in place and being aware of some of the liabilities that you could face and how to put those into place and to mitigate those liabilities and to meet them responsibly is a way of showing you're caring. It's a way of promoting community. So thank you very much for taking part in this session. And if you have any questions, there is a link on the main website where you can ask questions, and maybe I'll even see you on a safeguarding course in the future. Thank you very much for listening.